There we are, all official now. So, so we are joined here today by Damien from Hexagon. Damien is also a Make UK member. And of course, we've got Lisa Birch here from one of Make UK's Advantage partners, A-Plan, who will be able to outline some of the insurance implications that could be linked to the switch off. So let me share my screen so we have the presentation up, and then it's over to you, Damien. Just let everybody know there will be plenty of opportunities to ask questions as well. So can everybody see that? We got a thumbs up somewhere?
Yep, that's it. Perfect.
Excellent. Right then, over to you, Damien.
Great, thank you, and good morning, everyone. So I think we've got three sections to the overall webinar. I'm going to give some context and issues, hand over to Lisa to go through some insurance implications, and then a little bit about how we can help, as Annette said. Happy to take questions as we go, try and make it as interactive as possible, because I think the key thing that we really are trying to convey here is just an awareness of what is going on, because as I'll come on to, that seems to be lacking. So as Annette said, my name is Damien Fisher. I'm a Managing Director at Hexagon Consultants. We've recently launched our PSTN transfer division as part of Hexagon Consultants, because we feel this is such an important topic. We really need to get the right focus, skill set within the organisation to really support the UK industry. I'm very proud to be Make UK partners and also sponsor the regional and national awards. So if we go on, Annette, please. And moving. There we go. So that's, yeah, I've covered that. So in terms of the background, I'll keep this quite high level, but as I said, if anyone wants any more detail, then please let me know. But in essence, the analog telephone network that has been in existence since the late 1800s in the UK is going to be switched off. And as we'll all be very familiar with the analog telephone network that has powered things such as our business telephone lines, consumer telephone lines, and obviously, excuse me, more recently, broadband services and broadband related services. And as I'll come on to, it's not just voice contact or even broadband that goes through those services. There'll be things that are very business critical, such as CCTV and intruder alarms. Now, the reason that that is being switched off is mainly because it has been in existence since the 1800s. And to a degree, it's no longer fit for purpose. We are all bandwidth hungry, and that's only going to increase, and therefore we need to move to an all digital future. There are also issues around that technology that are end of service life, so parts are either hard or very almost impossible to get to repair it, and it's also not as efficient in terms of power and other related issues than the new digital technology. So that's the reason that Openreach, who run the network on behalf of the country, have decided to switch it off, which has clearly been supported by the regulator, Ofcom, and the UK government. And I'm sure if you're anything like me, you'll see a lot of digging and a lot of roadworks going on around at the moment, and a large proportion of that is laying new fibre optic cables to power a digital future. So I guess the key, therefore, is that the services that currently run over that network are going to need to be moved. And based on recent research by BT Wholesale, who are a previous employer of mine, and Cisco, 92% of UK businesses are not ready for the switch off, and 42% of SMEs report that they still use analog lines to transmit data. Which is ultimately really important when you think that although 2025 seems a very long way off, 47 months, 46 months-ish, to migrate that volume of telephony lines and all the services and all of the businesses that are using those services is not a very long time whatsoever. It can be complex, it can be simple, but Because the network has been around for so long, there is a degree of complexity. It is time bound, and the complexity really comes from the older technology is not so easy to interrogate as digital networks, and therefore understanding what services are actually running over these networks can sometimes be a bit of a challenge even for the most advanced companies. Companies that I've worked with or consulted for that have got quite mature IT organisations that are quite large would not be able to necessarily tell 100% all of the services that route over what networks and what the impact would be if they either switched off or migrated. So as I'll come on to, understanding and assessing the situation and therefore then making a plan for it is strong advice that we believe is critical for business continuity. You don't need me to tell you the supply chain and delivery risks that are global at the moment, driven by the pandemic and to a degree still as a consequence of Brexit. And therefore, this is a technology change. And if technology is in short supply, not only in the networks that need to be moved, but on the edge services that need to be moved, that I'll come on to on the next slide, then you don't want to be risking being at the back of a very long queue. And therefore, what we're saying is the time is now to act. Okay. Any questions on that before we move on? No? Okay, good, very clear. Super, Annette, thank you. So what services are impacted? Now, this isn't clearly an exhaustive list, but it is an illustrative one. You can obviously read for yourself down the left-hand side, but I'll have a quick trot through. So you've got the traditional analog telephony services that we would split into landlines, both consumer and business, contact centres and internal routing systems such as switchboards, etc. Passenger and commercial lifts have the emergency lift button and are connected. Traditionally, they've been connected via the old analog telephony lines, as are alarm systems such as intruder alarms, security, CCTV, fire, smoke, etc. And normally, those types of systems are very reliable, and you don't swap them out unless you absolutely have to. So there's quite a legacy set of systems there that would be connected to analog. And also in all of these, some of the technology might not be compatible with a digital future or might not operate as well. So not only have the networks got to be upgraded, but potentially businesses, CCTV and intruder alarms would need to be updated as well. And that's where you start getting the complexity that drives in. Connected machines, so refrigeration, the world of the Internet of Things where everything's connected, CNC machines, there are traditional ATM machines, air conditioners, etc., point of sale machines. All of these things are connected in some instances via the analog telephony. Now, it's important to say that some businesses have already embraced a digital future and have moved all of their services. It's the ones in the 2.4 million category on the previous slide that clearly need to understand this and then move. Fax machines, although they are a dying breed in terms of communications, there are quite a few that are still out there. The fix to convert those, if companies still want to use them to a digital future, isn't that complex, but again, it's another consideration. And when you move over to a digital future, there are all sorts of cyber and security risks that every single part of your business that is connected to the network is a potential point of failure. So that needs to be considered, even though it might not be business critical for the operation of your business. In the healthcare industry, care homes with fobs and alarms if patients get into trouble or if patients are being treated at home and they have the telecare fob, somebody has a fall or has an issue, presses a button and it sends through a signal to an alarm centre. They've traditionally been connected to the analog system. And of course, good old payphones and emergency phones actually used in prisons, motorways, car parks and hotels. Also traffic light systems, some of the railway networks. Again, anything that could or would need to connect to something over an analog line could well be connected, could well be in that sort of 2.4 million businesses that have still got reliance on these services. I think Lisa's going to talk a little bit more in her slot around the insurance implications, but as you can see, the business impact of that could be significant. Those services are critical to business continuity, the ability to trade, employees working. Clearly, there is insurance implications, health and safety. The list goes on. So the issue is the really the regulator, Ofcom, has put the responsibility for the migration for businesses onto the telecommunications providers. And in one way, that's good because there is clear accountability. The issue that we do have, and I'm still obviously in contact with a lot of the big telecommunications companies, having spent 17 years in the industry myself, is that the migration was set up to be a voluntary one. So the telecommunication companies cannot force migrate services, and therefore they cannot force closure, and they have to work with their customer base, whether it's direct or indirect, to move over. Now, what that's causing, because of the pandemic and also Brexit, is some inertia in the industry, because you've got the immovable force meets the irresistible object, or whatever way around that is, and some companies don't want to move and don't feel that they need to move. But when the telecommunications companies have got that level of migration, that level of transformation over a relatively short period of time, they are concerned and are beginning to lobby both the government and Ofcom that they would go down a forced migration. So they will close elements of the network. They will announce that those networks are closing, and they will be migrating their customers over. Now, that is not the case at the moment, but clearly something's going to have to give. You've either got the timescales going to have to give, you're going to have to give the approach, and obviously a lot of businesses have got other things to do, but this isn't going away, that's for sure. So that's it on that slide. Any questions before we move on? No? Okay, good, thank you. And therefore, in that context, what should I do? What should business leaders do? Well, I think the first thing is to appoint the right team to assess your risks and to manage the transition to IP. Many organisations have got robust, mature IT organisations. They might have the skills, they might not. They might have the capability, they might not. They might be flat out running other things, and therefore getting external support, external leadership for what is a one-off event could be a good option. So our advice is certainly, as I said before, understand the impact on your business and what services you need for the future. Now, that word need is super critical, because the services that you're currently buying might not be the ones that you need in the future in terms of functionality, in terms of speed, in terms of price. We all know what it's like when we're at home, or even in the business world, and you're just paying the bills and you don't really consider what you are getting for your money. This is an excellent opportunity to really assess how a move to digital, if you haven't done it already, could actually positively change a variety of different parts of your business. As we know, through COVID, as we're all working here today, a lot of businesses had to move tactically to get the workforce working remotely at scale. And many of those companies are still working in this hybrid fashion, whereby they're running old legacy networks. They have moved over tactically, but they're dual running. So some companies will still have all the old telephony systems, but they'll also have instances of Teams. And therefore, how do we want to work as a business moving forward? What technology do we need to have to unlock that way of working, whether it is working better when you're on site, or whether it's working virtually and remotely as we are at the moment.
Can I ask a question on that? You said as we go along. So those who have hybrid workers, I presume that, I mean, as most people have, the person working from home is working on their own broadband. Seeing as this is being driven by Openreach, that means that they will automatically be transferring all the domestic lines to IP if it hasn't already gone. So that we don't have any responsibility in that raid for our hybrid workers.
Not really, no, other than making sure, I guess, that they've got the right set up at home, that they've had DSC assessments and they've got the right technology at the back end. In terms of the connectivity, yes, Openreach are accountable for both building the fibre networks, as are many other fibre providers now, and they are migrating customers as they're closing those local exchanges. So the consumer side of things is, my colleagues in BT kill me for it, but far simpler in terms of you've got one line and you would have a fibre connection, and therefore you can plug your old landline, theoretically, into the back of your broadband router, and even that will work. But the change should be relatively invisible because the broadband will drop, it will come back on, and it should be relatively seamless. That's
what I thought. So it's those of us with commercial arrangements that have to have the plans in place.
That's right. And if you're still operating commercial premises, whether that be headquarters and offices, or whether that is factories and plants and other buildings elsewhere, that is where you start getting into the complexity of both the network switch off, because there's a lot of choice, and also the services that you are running over those that are dependent on those networks. Good, thank you very much, Charles. Keep them coming if you've got anything as we go through. Now, other considerations are making sure that you've got the right internet access. So has your business got the right bandwidth? Have you got the right support in place? And are you buying the right services and resilience and availability for what you need? And as I said, it's just a good opportunity to take stock. There's a lot of choice out there on the market, and you should just make sure that you get what you need, not necessarily what you've got at the moment. And then clearly, dependent on that assessment, all businesses should have a plan, and you should be factoring it into the overall scope of works that you're undertaking this year, next year and beyond, because it could be quite disruptive. It could cost some money up front in terms of capital investment, although a lot of the cloud-based technologies are more in a license agreement at the moment, so the need to upgrade a lot of kit has upfront has gone. However, if you do need to change some of the other infrastructure within your business, one, that could be disruptive, and two, clearly there's going to be some financial implications along with everything else that you're trying to do with running your business. So having a plan and getting ahead of the curve and factoring that into your business strategy and your business planning cycles, we are strongly recommending. And of course, you could always choose to outsource that to a trusted partner, because this is a one-off event, and with everything going on, some businesses are struggling to just run the business, let alone change the business. And of course, that's part of the offering that we give to our clients. So that's it in terms of that slide. I think now we are going to flick over to Lisa to go through some of the insurance considerations.
Thank you very much, Damien. And I just remembered we had a poll to start off with to gauge everybody's knowledge so far, and I completely forgot to launch it. So, but now, of course, you've had the content from Damien already, so we'll go straight over to Lisa, who will talk about.
Oh, I wanted to get full marks for knowing what was already happening.
We'll believe you. Right then, over to you, Lisa.
Thanks, Annette, and thanks, Damien, for the oversight. And if you could just jump to the next slide, that'd be brilliant. So yes, we are the approved insurance broker to Make UK, and as Damien said, there are a few implications to this in regards to fire and security alarms. So I just wanted to just cover this off. If we go to the next slide, please, Annette. A couple of things I really just wanted to point out. Most fires tend to happen overnight, or they at least happen when the premises is unoccupied. So that's why insurers like to see alarms that are linked to central stations that can be monitored. So in the event of a fire, then emergency services can be deployed. And similar to security systems, we've seen quite a few losses, manufacturers as well, where for a variety of reasons, the security system has failed. and that will give thieves uninterrupted access to your premises. So one manufacturer lost thousands in precious metals because they enjoyed access to the site over a bank holiday weekend completely uninterrupted. But losses happen and people buy insurance, and that's what insurance is for, to pay for these losses. So if we can just jump to the next slide, please, Annette. Will your policy respond? So most insurance policies have conditions that stipulate you need to do something or you need to refrain from doing something. So an example is that you have a fully working fire alarm that's linked to a central station and monitored 24 hours. Failure to comply with these conditions could mean that a claim isn't paid. So where are these conditions in your policy documents? Are they on the front page in bold with flashing lights? No, they're not. They're written in the small print. So do you know your policy conditions? Does your operations manager know them? Does your site manager know them? It is just something to be mindful of as we're going forward. As Make UK members, you get access to us, and we will undertake an audit of your insurance policies to make sure you're aware of any of these conditions. And if we're your insurance broker, we'll certainly look to get any of your onerous terms removed. However, insurers expect a duty of care from policyholders and to take reasonable precautions. So having mitigating measures in place, such as monitored systems, are always in the best interest of both parties. So really that was it. That's all I wanted to, just to cover, that not having these systems in place could mean that you're in breach of a policy condition, and therefore insurance wouldn't respond. So has anybody got any questions? Still awake? Lovely, thanks, Annette.
It would be good to hear, I think, from the group, if everybody is aware of what their obligations are, and if it's communicated to the wider team, those that will be affected by it. I wonder if any of the businesses that joined us today have any input towards that, of what their processes are when it comes to their warranties obligations.
It's straightforward. We've already transitioned to full IP, so everything is already covered inside our insurances, which is quite handy. We've just taken over a new building, so we're just going to work our way through that one and see what we have to do there. But all my current stuff is done and linked across and reflected on all my insurance policies. So it's nice to check that I've done it right, but we think we're good for the moment. So thank you.
Yeah. Good. What about anybody else on the call? Oh, everybody's very quiet. All right, back over to you then, Damien.
Super, thanks, Annette. And then, the final piece around how we can help. Well, as I said, we've got a separate division that can look after the migration. I won't drain this slide, but over the leadership team, we have over 75 years worth of experience delivering new products and technical migrations and complex digital programs. I've worked in telecoms 17 years. I was with BT for 10, and a variety of different cable companies that are now Virgin Media for 7 before that. And we've assimilated a great leadership team that can be deployed and are currently helping clients with that move to all IP. And the contact center environment is a very critical one at the moment, certainly with clients and previous employers that I've had. Moving a huge workforce of hundreds, if not thousands, to remote working through the early stages of the pandemic was very, very challenging, especially if those businesses support life critical services and have a lot of key workers in them. And I know that there is a lot of organisations out there that, again, are living in a bit of a hybrid world, because sometimes the technology change and the people change, employee contractual changes, are quite significant. And therefore that needs to be taken into consideration. How do we want to work today, and what are we going to do with all the legacy sites, buildings, technologies? So, as I said, the connectivity can be both voice, building services and contact centres. So that was it on that slide, really. Annette, we've pulled together a simple process that can be taken in bite-sized chunks. So should organisations just want to understand and assess what the problems are, because you either don't know or you're lacking some capability or capacity, then we can come in and help in terms of the technology, the operating model, any of the changes that are required, and clearly the insurance implications. We can then help design the right solutions and put a blueprint together for the future. We can compare what is out there. As I said, there's a lot of choice, and what you're currently buying and paying for, you might not necessarily need all of that in the future, or you might need some more. And that can be quite a wide array of choice in the market, so we can help do that comparison. And then, of course, we can migrate those services at the right pace for your businesses. So that's our proposition. And of course, if you move to the next slide, Annette, you can always contact us. So I know we've had a couple of questions through today's webinar. We'll open up, I think, for some Q&A in a moment. Annette, there's more information on our website, pstntransfer.com. I think Peter, the CEO of Hexagon, has just joined us. Morning, Peter. You've got myself and, of course, Lisa, and we would be more than happy to have a conversation. And as I said, the first things first is to start the journey, if you haven't already, like Charles and his company, understanding and assessing, and then making sure that you do have a plan. So, Annette, I don't know whether we had any polls or whether we had any further time for Q&A, any reflections on what we've spoken about, or maybe even, Charles, for you to give us a bit of insight as to how you found it, having already made the move.
With my RA Regional Advisory Board head on my other manufacturing things, I think one of the things about this is I think the people that aren't on the call are probably the people that are, aren't engaged with it. So I think it's very important, Annette, that we make sure that the message keeps going out, that this can potentially bite people on the bum. And it's not necessarily those in neat boxes. It's those with the more spread empires and the sort of the legacy systems you don't think about. The one I never thought about was actually things like the calls and lifts. So that's something that I think will surprise a lot of people, and I don't think that'll be the only thing that will get them. Most people have moved to VoIP already, but they've forgotten about things like their burglar alarms, they've forgotten things about their fire alarms. And I think continuing to get the message out there is going to be important to make sure that we don't have a disruption come 2025. So it's very useful to have it. But the journey for us was very straightforward. It's just slightly concerning because when you grow up, you're used to having everything on a nice copper wire. They look very flimsy, these things they put in the ground these days.
They are, absolutely. Yeah, no, that's great to hear, actually. And I think certainly speaking to the large telecoms companies, they are getting, as I said earlier, increasingly concerned that the time is running out. If everybody's delaying it and leaving it to the end, they have got a job to do, because it's the telecoms providers' role to help move and migrate, as well as the businesses that clearly need to give resources and cost. When they're looking at their glide paths of all of the customer migrations and all of the people that are paying services at the moment, they are behind where they need to be, and therefore there's a massive campaign trying to get that awareness. So that was really principal role for this webinar, to raise that awareness. And as you said, there are many gotchas out there. It's Many companies will have a relatively straightforward migration, many won't, and it's that level of complexity that you just don't know. And if you haven't done it before, like you said, the lifts, if you haven't done it before, you just would not assume, and everyone's looking at everybody else that we have got that one covered, and guess what, no one has. So yeah, interesting to hear your journey, Charles. Thanks a lot.
My pleasure. Thank you for the presentation.
It's a pleasure.
What about some of the other delegates? Is there anything today you've heard you weren't aware of? Anything you have more questions on?
Yeah, hi, my name's Tony. I represent the Grand. We're in the telecare segment, Damien. Just picking up on your point of adoption and what the government might do. We compare the rollout in this country with that of, let's say, Scandinavia, and they're obviously a lot further ahead than we are. When do you think the government may act on saying, right, well, this policy of let's let the market sort of drive this is not going to happen, and we might have to become a little bit more directive? When do you think that could happen?
I think it will. The rhetoric will certainly ramp up through the course of this year. I already am hearing, as I said, just there for repeating myself, that some companies are concerned that they're already behind the curve, and they've obviously got businesses to run, and a migration on a sometimes like-for-like basis is quite disruptive and not necessarily progressive in terms of innovation, because you're moving to technologies that currently exist, even though they're being innovated all the time. So I would say I can hear through industry and speaking to a lot of connections I've got in the telecoms world, they are beginning to lobby Ofcom, they are beginning to lobby government, and they are saying, look, we can't be left in a position where we are running old networks. They have to close, because that is the strategy. And also some of them, if they go wrong, finding spares is getting increasingly difficult, and the skill set to repair them. So I would imagine through the course of this year, they might do it in sections, they might do it in certain regions, they might do it with certain products, so it won't be a big bang, but I can see that certainly being a lot noisier through the course of 2022.
It's good news. As I say, the problem you've got with these sorts of adoptions is that you get the innovators, you get the followers, and then you get some laggards, but the system's only as good as its weakest link. And that's where, in order to close off and really complete the digital rollout, everybody has to do their bit, quite frankly.
Exactly, and it's hard to force a business to go through something like this if it's going to be quite disruptive and it's going to cost some money, especially in the current climate. So that's the tension. I know, having spent almost 6 years working in BT wholesale, launching new products and services and retiring old services, the hardest thing arguably to do was to close old networks, what we used to say, sunset them. You would just go through unending communications, and you would get a very long tail of customers that just would not engage. And we all used to laugh and say, you know, you can innovate, have cutting edge technology and launch it, but something's got to give on the other side, and arguably that was the most difficult thing. So you're absolutely right, and that's one of the big challenges. I think that's where you're going to see the tension and the noise will just amplify, really.
Thank you.
Damien, if I could, it's Peter Ahi. If I could just add to that, though, I think whilst legacy products in the past might have been difficult to come off, failure to deal with this, reason why we've got somebody like Lisa on the call, is that there are other consequences that are coming down the track as a result of this switch off. So if your alarm stopped working, your lift stopped working, somebody gets caught in the lift and it's not compliant, etc., etc. So I think how do we start to get some of those messages and the implications of not doing? So I totally agree with you that dealing with the tail is going to be very difficult unless people become aware of potential consequences. And we'll continue to work on this in terms of ramping up that message and implications to businesses, because we're trying to help them avoid health and safety issues and various other things. Whilst it may not be very obvious at the outset, that's where they will end up if they don't address some of these changes that are needed.
Yeah, what we're hearing from members is there are just so many pressures faced by manufacturers, and Damien touched on that earlier, with of course with the pandemic, said the crisis now. So something like this is not naturally on the top of the list of priorities.
Totally.
The message I think we're trying to definitely get out there is of deal with it now whilst you've still got time, otherwise it becomes just another really big pressure on you and on your
exactly. And it's about getting ahead of it, not being controlled by it. So even if you have a plan and you decide to do it at a later point that suits your business, then you're consciously making a decision rather than not knowing quite how big the impact will be. We've got a range of different partners in telecoms technology, clearly with Lisa and insurance brokers, and also options to help some smaller companies raise funding. Now, we're not going to go through that today, but what we are offering is a one-stop shop service in those 5 steps, but certainly start at the beginning, understand what your options, understand the challenges, and then you can formulate a plan.
I have a question, if that's okay.
Of course, Clive.
Yeah, go ahead, Clive.
Yeah, thanks for the seminar. It's interesting. I certainly was unaware of the issues to do with lifts and burglar alarms. So I think that's certainly a takeaway for me. We're just beginning the process. We're an engineering company employing a couple of hundred people in Huddersfield, and my thought is how, roughly speaking, what are the sort of range of timescales one should be planning to complete this process? We're right at the very beginning of it, so your seminar came along at a very timely moment. But I'm just sort of thinking, okay, 2025 is the drop dead date, possibly made mandatory. But what sort of timescale should we be thinking of at this stage?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult, obviously, without understanding individual circumstances, but I'd be interested to hear how long it took Charles. But certainly, having worked in big organisations, and for some clients it can take, for larger organisations, it can be an 18-month transformation programme. If you've got local contact centres with on-prem PBX type connectivity, the old data rooms, and that all needs to be moved and migrated, that can be quite a significant 6-9 month piece of work. If you've got other internet connectivity, that's a few months. If you then need to upgrade your systems and work with suppliers, I mean, I've just got a new kitchen. It took me 9 months to actually get a freezer, would you believe, right? Because the chipset wasn't available. 9 months. So I guess how long's a piece of string? But to not dodge the question, I would say, if you've got reliance on it and many of your services are running through it, I would have thought, 6 months-ish plus would be a reasonable timescale. You could do it in 3, but that would be more of a simple piece of work, because clearly you've got to go through that assessment, you've got to go through mobilising, you've then got to go through enacting, and then you've actually got to do it and manage with the change afterwards. So yeah, hopefully that's not too vague, but I was not expecting the detailed answer. Yeah, it could take 2 years, it could take 6 months, I'd say, in that type of range. But Charles, I'd be very interested to hear what you think.
Well, just one of the things we found was if you did it in bite-sized chunks. So, for example, switching off the fax was going to be a massive thing. So we actually proved that they didn't need the landline fax, and then we moved it onto a digital fax. We then ran the 2 parallel and then quietly switched off the. So it's that took the time, because you had to get people to trust the fact that it actually works digitally. And there are lots of people out there who offer lots of communications options, but being able to have somebody who can break it down so that you can actually see your steps and agree that, so no one's surprised. I mean, we did it 5 years ago. We did it sort of 5 years ago. We went quite early on this, but we still only turned off 2 of the sort of hard lines 2 years ago. So it sort of leaves that length of time running through, and just basically settles down and was comfortable. And I was the last one to actually be signed off on the whole thing once I knew it was finished. And I said, all the BT lines were done. But it does take a while.
Damien, and I'm sure you would have touched on this, and apologies again for joining late. The period between now and partway through 2023, organisations still have the opportunity to do this in a structured, relatively controlled way, and depending on the implications in their businesses and requirements, so whether you need new alarm systems, etc., I think the supply chain that's out there could probably cope with it. I think as we go through 23 and into 24 and the message really gets out there, you're going to be joining the queue for replacement items, and things are going to get difficult. We're all hoping that supply chains have recovered by 2024, 2025. But we are encouraging people, don't let this become an issue for you. Address it now, get it dealt with, assess what needs doing, and get onto that replacement cycle, because as the queue builds, there's only so many engineers that can go around fixing these things at points in time. There will only be so much hardware and capability in the system. So yeah, we all think 2025 feels a long way off, but it's going to come with problems, I think, within the next 18 months. That will impact delivery times.
Also, you missed, Peter, the benefits as well to the company of actually going digital or going, fully
Absolutely.
digital.
Yeah.
And actually, the productivity side of it, that makes it much smoother, increases your productivity, means everything moves better, the communications move faster as well, and so you as a company benefit from it. Not only from the bigger pipe on the broadband, which allows you to do more, but just also from the interoperability between your IT and your phone systems.
Yeah.
So there is actually a commercial benefit for getting on with it. Plus the fact you don't have to pay BT, so your costs go down because you're already paying for broadband.
But Damien's made a good point to me in the past. The number of people that are paying money to organizations like BT for stuff that they don't even use today. It's just legacy systems, legacy lines into their buildings. You get the opportunity to, like you say, Charles, do that cleanse as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's that whole piece around the change management element, Charles, that you said. You've got to take your employees with you to trust the new technology and to get them, in some instances, to work in a different way. That cannot be underestimated for some businesses, for sure. And certainly, as we know, if you have gone to partial digital future, or as I'm sure we've got connected devices at home, the fact that you can work anywhere off any device and connect seamlessly, as long as you can get some sort of a 4-5G GSM signal or connect to a Wi-Fi hotspot, they're the benefits, because you're always accessing your information, you can always access your data, you can always be accessible. And it's a really good point you made, Charles. The business case of doing this cannot be lost. It's not just all cost, it's not all disruption. There is the company, the telecoms companies, the government wouldn't be spending billions of pounds building digital Britain if there wasn't strong benefits to it. It's just getting over that hump at a time when a lot of businesses have got other things to worry about. But this is certainly one that's not going away.
Well, thank you very much, Damien, Lisa as well, Charles, Clive, Tony, for your input, Peter, of course. Looking at 5 sort of boxes with names on this. Anybody else who's got anything they would like to ask at this stage? We might have lost those 5 people. There's no response. I will be sharing the presentation as well. We'll do that with a follow-up email. They will also have the contacts there for Lisa, for Damien. If anybody is happy to be contacted by Lisa and Damien, or if you're not, just drop me a quick line as well. And at this stage, I think it seems, if there are no more questions, you've been gifted 15 minutes of your day back, which is never a bad thing, is it? So Charles can sit and look at the squirrels in Thailand a bit longer. And so yeah, thank you so much this morning for joining us. A huge thank you to Lisa and to Damien for doing this information piece. It is massively appreciated. If you are a Make UK member, of course, A Plan is there, is always happy to go over your current insurance documents to make sure that you are covered as well. So this is a great member benefit, of course, you are enjoying, and Hexagon also a Make UK member itself as well, and a great supporter of our sector. So there's lots of support out there, and of course you've got Make UK itself as well. So yeah, unless there's anything else, I wish you a good day and a lovely weekend.
Thank you very much, Jeanette. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.